I'm Megan Robinson, joined by Colter Nuanez. Colter, there are 2 weekends left of regular season basketball in the Big Sky. However, this is our last show of the regular season. So you're going to predict some all-conference award winners presented by Visit Pocatello. Who are your coaches of the year?
I mean, Trisha Binford right now at Montana State, they're undefeated, so it's hard to say it's not her. But, I mean, Arthur Morera in his first year at Idaho has been one of the surprises in the league. Gentile Jackson has, I mean, shoot, Weber's won twice as many league games this year as they did all of last year, so that's impressive. Lori Payne has got Northern Arizona at 20 wins plus for the third year in a row, and they're a top 100 team in the net. So I think all those coaches are deserving. But if you run the table in the Big Sky Conference, you got to be the coach of the year. So I think Coach Binford is definitely the choice on the women's side. On the men's side, Travis DeCure at Montana has deserved this award, or at least been a top candidate for the award many times. Probably half of the seasons he's been with the Grizz. He has been the victim of high expectations so often. Like when people expect you to win the league and then you do, they don't think it's as good of a coaching job as if you finish higher than you were predicted. So, and that was the case this year too. I mean, they were picked to win the league, but 9 newcomers, that's the most in the history of Montana basketball and one of the most in the history of the league. So for them to be alone in first place and well out in front of everybody in the entire conference besides Northern Colorado, I'm going with Coach DeCure at Montana.
There are a handful of men's and women's players who have made a case for MVP honors. Who do you think has earned that on both the men's and women's sides?
On the women's side, I'm going with Esmeralda Morales because she's the best player on the best team. I know there's players that are averaging more points. Sophie Glancy has a great case. Taylor Feldman has a great case, both of them at Northern Arizona. But I think Morales has been at her best in the biggest games. I mean, she averaged 28 points per game against Northern Arizona this year. She was the player of the game and had 2 of the plays of the game in Montana State's win over Montana in Missoula, which is probably the win that I don't know about define them, but it's the win that kept them undefeated. Like they got pressed all the way down the wire against the Lady Grizz of Missoula, and Morales was the one that won them the game. So I'm going with Morales on the women's side. On the men's side, I'm going with Reynolds because I think he impacts the game as a two-way player more than anybody else in the conference, let alone on his team. I know Dylan Darling is probably the guy that has elevated his team the most at Idaho State, but with them coming off of a pair of losses this last weekend and sitting kind of at 500 in conference play, you got to go with one of those 2 teams that's well out in front, and I'm going with Langston Reynolds from Northern Colorado.
You mentioned Dylan Darling just now. You also mentioned him last week as a person in the MVP conversation. He's also made a case for newcomer of the year. Who are your picks for newcomer of the year in the Big Sky Conference?
Man, I wish you could have a dual newcomer of the year on the men's side because Joe Pridgeon has done so much for Montana. I mean, he's given them the edge that they've lacked the last 5 years. He's unlocked everything Travis DeCure wants. But Dylan Darling is undeniable. And I think if you have to pick one, you got to pick him. I mean, he's averaging like 25 points per game in conference play. And, he's taken Idaho State and put him squarely on his back.
Moving on, we've all heard the saying, defense wins championships. Who are your defensive players of the year?
On the women's side, I think this would be unprecedented, but I think you have to do it. I think it's Taylor Chirick at Montana State. I mean, she's in the top 10 in the country in steals. And when you factor in that she comes off the bench and plays like 19 minutes a game, I mean, her steals per minute are just unbelievable. Montana State has already set a program record for steals in a single season. And I mean, they forced 28 turnovers again on Saturday. And she's the head of the snake. She's the one that really ignites that press. I love the role that they've carved out for her. On the men's side, I'm going to go with Jake O'Neal from Idaho State. He's one of the best shot blockers in the league, one of the best rebounders in the league, and he's doing it at only about 6'4", 6'5", so he's an undersized big.
Taylor Chirick making her impact felt for the Montana State Bobcats. Obvious freshman of the year candidate. Is she your pick? And if not, who are they?
In terms of my predictions, I always try to say different players for different awards just because I think that's how it always crumbles with the coaches and their voting. So I'm going to say Courtney Grossman is the freshman of the year. If Chirick gets defensive player of the year, I mean, Grossman's been awesome. I covered her in high school, and I expected her to be sort of like a stretch forward, and that's what she's been offensively. But she's the best rebounder in the conference. I did not see that coming. And the way that she's sort of transformed herself physically and become, I mean, seriously one of the strongest players in the league as only a freshman has been really, really impressive.
Last but certainly not least, We have talked about the importance of depth throughout the season, and Montana State has shown a deep bench goes a long way. Who are you taking for your reserves of the year?
I think Money Williams at Montana has got to be the winner on the men's side. Them bringing him off the bench has unlocked everything. That's the moment they did that is the moment they started this 8-game winning streak, and that's what's been the thing that's propelled them into first place. On the women's side, can I give it to the Montana State bench? I think like the entire Montana State bench: Addison Harris, Taylor Churick, Taylor Jansen, Natalie Picton. I mean, they all have had such a huge impact, and it's been really really impressive to watch.
Well, Coulter, thank you so much for these predictions. Some of them I feel were kind of bold. I absolutely love it. We will revisit this together in Boise and see how well you do. And if you want to hear more of Coulter's analysis on Big Sky basketball, tune into Around the Big Sky Women's Hoops, 4 p.m. Wednesdays Mountain Time, and Around the Big Sky Men's Hoops, Thursdays, 4 p.m. Mountain Time. Everything on Skyline Sports. Coulter, appreciate you being with me for the last 5 weeks talking Big Sky Hoops.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.